The Montreal Police Force is making big bucks protecting the private sector. Last year alone, the police force raked in more than $2 million from contracting officers out to private sector clients. That has raised some concerns about possible conflicts of interest. With more on this, we are joined from Ottawa by Professor Rigakos, author of the new Parapolice, a book that investigates paid duty policing and private security. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Rigakos, let's establish kind of what we're talking about in terms of what these police officers are being asked to do, by whom, and how they're paid.
Well, there's a number of different public and private clients that public police force across the country are lending out their officers to on a daily basis. So it could be anything from nightclubs to public schools and even business improvement areas. And
this is in their off time?
Yeah, this is the police are sort of have done their hourly work for the city or for the province and are doing this as extra duty.
Tell me if there's a conflict of interest that would be inherent, I guess, depending on their employer outside of the police force.
There is, in the sense that the appearance of any sort of impropriety is itself something that would produce unease in anyone who was being detained, arrested by a public police officer in uniform, but who was under the control, I guess, on a temporary basis by a private client. So, is the motivation by the police officer motivated by the public good, or is it in the interests of the private client?
And what about the? I mean, is there a contract in place? I mean, what happens when a company, say, has a big party and they just want to have extra security and they hire, police officers or pay duty? Do they write it down, consider it by case, and then it's in writing?
Well, each police force in most cities have guidelines for which the police will follow. And if you, for example, if you go with the Toronto Police Service, they'll actually charge you a 15% administrative fee. That's how the Montreal Police also raise money as well. And so what happens is depending on the situation, depending on the type of contract, the police will tell you how many officers you need at minimum. For example, a public school dance at a local school will require 2 officers. A high school dance will require 3 or 4 officers.
I know other police departments in other jurisdictions, Calgary, Toronto among them, and some in Nova Scotia, have been doing this for a number of years. Has there ever been an issue of conflict of interest or a lawsuit or any of that, to your knowledge?
Well, there is always the potential for lawsuits. There has been a lawsuit not that long ago with the Skydome where police officers were involved in making an arrest, and the person fell down the stairs and got injured and sued the police, sued the private security, sued the Skydome. One of the problems associated with paid duty policing is that unless there are specific indemnity clauses built in, and they're doing this more and more, and even if that's the case, it doesn't stop anyone from going on and suing. If you sue a police for excessive use of force while under the auspices of doing something for a private client, the taxpayer in the end is actually ensuring the security provision by this private client, because if the police get sued and they're sued successfully, it's the taxpayers that actually have to pay for that.
And they wouldn't necessarily write that into the deal hired by the school.
They're doing so increasingly, but then it's oftentimes when you go to court, the judge will look for who has the deepest wallet and who's able to pay for the damages.
What about the police officer's right to say, once my shift is done, it's up to me how I'm going to, provided I'm following the rules of the police department, but it's up to me if I want to make a little extra money? Well,
they have every right to do so. In fact, most police officers who do this, all police officers who do this, are actually volunteering for it, and so there's nothing to force them to do it. And the police officers we spoke to who actually do some paid duty work in places like Toronto make it clear that they do it, but they're also acting in the interest of the public good. So they won't, act at the behest of a private client and use the power of authority of the office of constable to enforce some private code of conduct. But of course, it's the appearance that matters most.
And I guess that's where the debate is. It's the possibility, the optics of impropriety, and then I guess down the road the possibility of issues.
Yeah, let me give you a good example of how that plays itself out. Downtown Toronto, the downtown young business improvement areas used to spend over $250,000 a year, and you wouldn't even notice if you went downtown, for paid duty foot patrol. So if you were walking down Yonge Street in Toronto and you saw an officer smiling to you on the beat, you don't know if that officer is actually under the employ of the city or whether they're being paid for by the Business Improvement Association downtown. After the Jane Kriba shooting, the city stepped in and said, we're going to take all of this over, and we're going to start providing around-the-clock foot patrols. But the BIA, even after doing so, and in fact had all this money released back to them because they weren't paying for it, decided they still wanted to augment that. And I think one of the reasons they wanted to do that is because they wanted to have more say in the way that the police conduct their business on Yonge Street.
Sure, and all the while hoping that people wouldn't act differently if they knew the difference between, you know, who was actually paying the bills at the time. Moving forward. Thank you so much, Mr. Rigakos.
My pleasure.
Well, a tentative contract has been reached between the Canadian auto workers and GM. So just ahead, BNN's Michael Kane will bring us the details on